Good morning, my name's Chris Liddiard, I'm from New England site. This morning we're going to be looking at Mark 5, 21 to 43, which you will have read in your Bible every day this morning. I'm going to focus particularly on two people's approach to Jesus when they were in need, because these are two very familiar stories. So I'm just going to have a look at this aspect of this. So Jesus, it says in verse 21, is beside the sea and a great crowd gathered around him. So we can imagine that there are a lot of people here and they've all come either to hear Jesus, they want to know what he's saying, or maybe they want healing too. We just don't know, but there's a lot of them. And then this man, Jairus, comes along, who is a ruler in the synagogue. So he's somebody who people would know. He's somebody with a bit of status, but he doesn't rely on that status. He doesn't call out to Jesus and say, "Oh, Jesus, you come here." No, he makes his way through the crowd to the front to get to Jesus. And that also means that he's actually in front of the crowd too. They can all see him. But he just doesn't care about that. When he gets to Jesus, he throws himself at Jesus' feet. Now, that obviously is a posture of humility. It's saying, "You're greater than me." But I think also here we have a posture of desperation. Here is a desperate father who's just left his dying daughter, and he comes to Jesus and throws himself at his feet. And then what he does next is, it says that he implored him earnestly, saying, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay hands on her so that she may be made well and live." Now that is a very kind of tame reading of that. When we think about that verb, to implore, I looked up the definition and it says that it's to beg someone earnestly or desperately to do something. Not many of us have ever been in an experience where we've had to beg for something or had someone beg us for something. I can only think of kind of trivial examples when our children were little. And they might say things like, "Mummy, mummy, mummy, please can I have some more sweets?" Or "Mummy, mummy, mummy, can I go to bed 10 minutes later?" And although those are little things, there are elements of that I think are true to all begging, and that is there is a repetition of what we want, and there's a kind of agitation about it because there's a desperation. And certainly this man, I'm sure, was saying, "Jesus, Jesus, please come, please come, please come and lay your hands on my daughter." So he's calling out to Jesus. It's not just a matter of fact kind of tone that he's using. He's imploring him earnestly. He really means it. He's really desperate. But at the same time, he's expressing faith. Did you see? It says, "Come and lay hands on her so that she will be healed." He's expressing faith. Come so that she will be healed. If you come, she will be healed. So what does Jesus do? Jesus doesn't turn him away. He doesn't look down on him on the floor and think, "What an expression of emotion that is." No. He hears the man's heart and he sees his faith. And it says, oh, it's just wonderful. It says, verse 24, it says, "And he went with him." Can you imagine the relief for that man knowing that Jesus was coming with him? Jesus, who could be the answer to his prayers. We need to remember, don't we? Jesus is with us all the time. And especially when we are in need. We need to know that, don't we? That he's with us and goes with us. So the crowd followed. But there's an interruption, and the interruption comes from somebody who also presses in. And this is the woman who's had a flow of blood for 12 years. So she presses in. But unlike Jairus, this woman comes secretly. She comes from behind. So it's not openly. Why is that? Well, a woman who's experiencing any form of discharge of blood was considered ritually unclean, and that meant ceremonially unclean. She couldn't, if she were in Jerusalem, she wouldn't be allowed into the women's courts of the temple. But more than that, it would mean that she could not touch anyone, because if she touched anyone, they also would be contaminated by her uncleanness and they would become unclean. This would mean that people wouldn't want to be near her, because to get clean again, they would have to make sacrifices, and they wouldn't want to be continually doing that. So you can imagine the effect that's had on her life and her family life. There'd be no family hugs there. And also just think about the terrible embarrassment where everybody knows about her. I imagine perhaps that she's come heavily veiled so that people can't see that it's her, because she shouldn't really be there in a position, in a situation where she might be jostling with other people, because she could make them unclean. So she comes secretly from behind. But she too expresses faith. She says, if I touch even his garments, I will be made well. What an expression of faith that is. I will be made well. And this is exactly what happened. It says in verse 29 that immediately the flow of blood dried up, and she felt in her body that she would healed of her disease. Now we might think, well, that's the end of that story then. But actually Jesus responds differently to how we might imagine. You see, he knows her, he knows why she's touched him, but he calls her out and makes it public. Why does he do that? Well, I think it's because he knows about all her needs and not just about this specific one. So she has to come forward and say to him, and it says that she came in fear and trembling and told him the whole truth. That here she does get a chance to voice what her story has been, and she's heard by Jesus. And what does he say? He says, daughter, your faith has made you well. So he's seen her faith, and he's saying that she's been made well. So I think there's an element of this where Jesus knew that she needed everybody else to know that she'd been made well, because it would just deal with all that social exclusion straight away, that she's now clean. Also, his response wasn't, oh, you've made me unclean. Our uncleanness doesn't make Jesus unclean. He's borne all of that, hasn't he, for us? But it doesn't make him unclean. It never does. But also, there's something really wonderful here. He calls her daughter. There's only one time when Jesus calls anyone daughter, and it's when this story is told in the Gospels, this particular woman. And I think that that's really wonderful. I think if you think about a daughter, calling somebody daughter, you're expressing relationship with them. You're expressing love and acceptance. You're expressing that they're part of the family. So amazing meeting with Jesus for her. So they return to the journey and carry on to Jairus' house. And in the meantime, they're told that his daughter has died. But Jesus just carries on and gets to the house and heals her. So I want us just to think in summary about these two people and the way that they approach Jesus. Both of them press in. They press in to get to Jesus. And that requires effort and purpose and determination. And you know that we need to do that too. And how do we do that? We do that by our praise and worship. We do that by making time for prayer. We have to be intentional about that. They had different approaches. One was open and vocal, and the other one was in secret and silent. And you know, sometimes we can't even give voice to what our needs are. But it's okay because Jesus hears and knows. Then both of them were desperate, one for herself and one on behalf of his child. So this tells us, doesn't it, that we can bring other people to Jesus as well, and he will hear us. So he responds to them. And did you notice that two daughters have been healed here? One, the daughter of Jairus, and one, a woman that Jesus called daughter. And that speaks to us, doesn't it, about the fact that Jesus cares just as much for women and children as he does about anyone else. So I want you to think about, are you feeling desperate today? And where you're putting your faith. Hebrews 4:16 says this: "Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may find help in time of need." And that's exactly what these two people found, and it's what you will find if you call to Jesus. Have a great day.